Imagine for a second that you are absurdly rich. You decide to treat yourself to the absolute pinnacle of luxury and performance. The most famous exotic sports car on the planet. You pay a fortune for it, but every time you try to drive the thing, it breaks down. So being a practical guy, you take it apart yourself, only to discover that the manufacturer has been charging you supercar prices for parts that belong in a literal farm tractor. You go straight to the CEO to politely suggest an improvement, and he looks you dead in the eye and tells you to go back to your farm and leave the cars to the experts. What do? Do you write a strongly worded letter? Do you ask for a refund? No. You build a multi-million-dollar factory right down the road, poach its best engineers, and build a car so breathtakingly brilliant that it completely changes the automotive world forever, just to spite him. Welcome to the Curiosity Diary. Today we're cracking open the diary on the ultimate story of petty revenge turned absolute genius, the origins of Lamborghini. Our story starts right after the Second World War. Italy is frankly a bit of a mess. The economy is in ruins, agriculture is struggling, and the country desperately needs to rebuild. Enter our main character, Ferruccio Lamborghini. Ferruccio wasn't born with a silver spoon in his mouth. He grew up on a grape farm in northern Italy. But Ferruccio wasn't interested in grapes. He was interested in what made the farm machinery tick. During the war, he served as a mechanic for the Italian Royal Air Force on the island of Rhodes, where he basically became a wizard at cobbling together working machines out of absolute scraps. When the war ended, Ferruccio looked around and saw a country that desperately needed tractors to farm the land, but he had no money to buy them. He also saw mountains of abandoned Allied military vehicles sitting around doing nothing. So he put two and two together. He started buying up leftover military engines and rigged them into cheap, reliable tractors for local farmers. It was the perfect product at the perfect time. The business exploded. By the late 1950s, Lamborghini Trattori was one of the biggest agricultural manufacturers in Italy. Then he started building heating and air conditioning units too. By his early 40s, Ferruccio wasn't just wealthy, he was a tycoon. He was the Italian dream incarnate. And what do self-made, obscenely wealthy Italian tycoons do in the 1950s? They buy cars, lots of them. Alfa Romeos, Lancias, Maseratis, Aston Martins. Ferruccio bought them all. But none of them were quite right. The Maseratis were too heavy, the Astons were too fussy, so he naturally gravitated towards the crown jewel of Italian motoring, Ferrari. Ferruccio Lamborghini loved Ferraris. He owned several 250 GTs, but he had one massive, incredibly annoying problem with them: the clutch. You see, Ferrari back then was running a very specific kind of business. The founder, Enzo Ferrari, only really cared about one thing, and that was motor racing. Selling road cars to wealthy civilians was just a side hustle to fund his Formula One and Le Mans racing teams. Because of this, Ferrari's road cars could be, let's just say, a little rough around the edges. They were essentially race cars with leather seats. Ferruccio kept burning out the clutches on his Ferraris. After paying mechanics a fortune to constantly replace them in a neighbouring city of Modena, his mechanic's intuition kicked in. He decided to take the car apart in his own tractor factory. When he cracked open the transmission, he couldn't believe his eyes. The clutch in this exotic, top-tier masterpiece of a sports car was a standard commercial clutch made by a company called Borg & Beck. It was the exact same clutch Ferruccio was putting in his tractors. Let that sink in. You're paying crazy luxury supercar money and you're getting parts of an agricultural plough. It's like going to a Michelin-star restaurant and finding out the chef is microwaving beans from the discount supermarket down the road. Ferruccio realised that if he just put a slightly bigger, better clutch in the car, the problem would be solved. So he requested a meeting with the big boss himself, Enzo Ferrari. Now, we need to talk about Enzo Ferrari for a second. Enzo was not a man who took feedback well. His nickname was Il Commendatore, the commander. He wore dark sunglasses indoors, ran his company like an absolute dictator, and viewed his customers as a necessary annoyance. Ferruccio, on the other hand, was a fiery, stubborn, newly rich industrialist who didn't suffer fools gladly. This was an unstoppable force meeting an unmovable ego. The exact dialogue of this meeting in 1962 has become the stuff of legend. Ferruccio finally gets an audience with Enzo in Maranello. He says something along the lines of, "Enzo, your cars are beautiful, but your clutches are rubbish. You're using my tractor parts." Enzo, sitting behind his desk, looks at this guy. He sees a farmer, a newly rich tractor builder wearing a nice suit. Enzo narrows his eyes and drops the insult that changed automotive history. He said, "The car is fine. The problem is that you are a tractor driver. You don't know how to drive a Ferrari. Let me make the cars. You stick to making tractors." Can you imagine? You don't say that to a guy who built an empire out of scrap metal. You just don't. Ferruccio stormed out, but he didn't just go home and cry about it. As he was driving back to his factory, his anger crystallized into absolute crystal clear spite. He thought, right, you think I can only build tractors? I'm going to build a sports car, and it's going to make yours look like a joke. In May 1963, Ferruccio officially founded Automobili Ferruccio Lamborghini. And just to rub salt in the wound, he built his brand new, state-of-the-art factory in Sant'Agata Bolognese, barely 20 miles down the road from Ferrari's headquarters. But Ferruccio knew he couldn't do it alone. He needed the best brains in Italy. So he went shopping. And who did he hire? He hired the guys who were just as mad at Enzo Ferrari as he was. A few years prior, Ferrari had suffered something called the Palace Revolt, where a bunch of his top engineers got fed up with his management style and walked out. Ferruccio swooped in and grabbed them. He hired Gianpaolo Dallara and Paolo Stanzani, two brilliant young chassis engineers. He also hired Bob Wallace, a legendary test driver, but his absolute masterstroke was the engine. Ferruccio wanted a V12 because Ferraris used V12s, so he hired Giotto Bizzarini to design it. Why is that funny? Because Giotto Bizzarini was the exact guy who had previously designed Ferrari's most legendary engine, the one in the 250 GTO. Ferruccio basically hired Ferrari's ex-head chef to open a restaurant across the street. To make sure the engine was a beast, Ferruccio gave Bizzarini a unique contract. He would pay him a flat fee, plus a massive cash bonus for every single horsepower the engine produced over Ferrari's V12. The result? A 3.5-litre quad-cam V12 masterpiece that screamed to high heavens and cranked out 360 horsepower, putting Ferrari's engines to shame. Lamborghini's V12 architecture was so incredibly good, they basically used evolved versions of this exact same engine for the next 50 years, right up until the Murcielago in 2010. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. The timeline Ferruccio demanded was insane. He wanted a working prototype ready for the Turin Auto Show in November 1963, just months away. They finished the body of the prototype called the 350 GTV. It looked like a spaceship, but there was a big problem. Bizzarini's glorious new V12 engine was too tall. It literally didn't fit under the hood. The auto show was opening in days. What do? Do they cancel? Of course not. This is Italy in the 60s. Ferruccio had his team fill the empty engine bay with heavy ceramic bricks so the car would sit at the correct ride height on its suspension. He kept the hood firmly locked for the entire auto show. Whenever a journalist asked to see the engine, Ferruccio would just casually say, sorry, we lost the key. Smoke and mirrors, but it worked. The car generated massive buzz. By 1964, they had fixed the engine clearance, refined the design and released the production version, the 350 GT. It was everything Ferruccio promised. It was faster than a Ferrari, it rode better, the interior was luxurious, and crucially, the clutch didn't break. Ferruccio had done it. He had proved his point. He built a better front-engine Grand Tourer than Enzo Ferrari. He could have just retired right then and there, but his young engineers had a secret project brewing. Something that wouldn't just beat Ferrari, but would make Ferrari look like a dinosaur. Dallara, Stanzani and Wallace were young guys. They didn't just want to build a comfortable cruiser for wealthy older gentlemen. They were obsessed with the new trend in racing. Putting the engine in the middle of the car, behind the driver for better balance. They started working nights and weekends, off the clock, designing a radical mid-engined road car chassis. When they finally showed the blueprints to Ferruccio, he approved it, but mostly because he thought it would be a cool marketing exercise. He figured they'd sell maybe about 50 of them to weirdos. In 1965, they showed just a bare rolling chassis at an auto show. No body, just a beautiful mess of tubes with a massive V12 engine mounted sideways right behind the driver's head. People lost their minds. Wealthy buyers were throwing blank checks at Ferruccio for a car that didn't even have a body yet. Ferruccio hired a 27-year-old design genius named Marcello Gandini to sketch a body for the chassis. And at the 1966 Geneva Motor Show, they pulled the silk sheet off the finished product. They called it the Miura, named after a legendary breed of Spanish fighting bulls. The automotive world stopped breathing. Nobody had ever seen anything like it. It was impossibly low, beautiful, and capable of 170 miles per hour, making it the fastest production car on the planet. It was an absolute cultural earthquake. Up until this point, fast cars were just sports cars. The Miura was something entirely different. It was so aggressive, so exotic, and so fast that journalists had to invent a new word for it. They called it a supercar. Everyone wanted one. Rock stars, royalty, actors. Miles Davis drove one. Rod Stewart bought one. Frank Sinatra bought a Miura, famously saying, "You buy a Ferrari when you want to be somebody. You buy a Lamborghini when you are somebody." And what was Enzo Ferrari doing while all this was happening? He was furious. He had insisted for years that mid-engine cars were too dangerous for regular drivers. He clung to his front-engine designs, but the Miura instantly made every single Ferrari on the road look obsolete. It forced Ferrari to scramble and eventually copy Lamborghini's homework, just to stay relevant in a market they used to own. And that, my friends, is why you never insult the guy who builds your tractors. Ferruccio Lamborghini didn't start out wanting to be an automotive legend. He just wanted a car that worked for the money he paid. But because of one man's ego, a spark of spite was ignited that gave birth to the Raging Bull. Ferruccio didn't just create a rival company. He fundamentally shifted the axis of the automotive world and created the blueprint for every supercar we see today. If you enjoyed uncovering this piece of history, hit that like and subscribe button so you don't miss the next one. That's today's story from the Curiosity Diary, and I'll see you in the next one.